Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here talking with Peter Scalzo, the guru of Cancer and Peace, the guy who's been through the 18-year cancer struggle. And today we're going to talk about a really hard topic. And even just when I brought it up, you winced. And we were thinking about, both of us have a mutual friend who has a reoccurrence. And that's what we want to talk about today is when you have a reoccurrence. And I noticed immediately that you were processing feelings and emotions. And so I think it might be good just to start with that. What did you feel?
I don't know if it's recurrence or reoccurrence.
Reoccurrence. I don't know.
I
That's
don't
a good
know.
question. Well, I am
But
not literate enough to answer that question for this podcast. So you guys can
I'll
make
just
fun of us
pronounce-
and leave notes that say something along the lines of, Sean, you idiot. Why would you ever say that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, recurrences, I had 6. So, and it kept getting worse and worse, which a lot of times that happens with a recurrence. Doesn't have to, but where it moved from a surgical solution to then metastatic to then life, basically a terminal diagnosis. So there's a whole host of emotions that I felt. I tend to, when I hear news of a recurrence, first of all, I've already been through a lot of pain and suffering, but what I've clung to is the fact that, okay, my surgery is done. Yes, it took me months to get back to a new normal, but maybe cancer's in my rearview mirror. Maybe it's behind me, and all of a sudden, thump, cancer goes right back in my front view. And so all that emotional energy that I did, all that work that I did to manage my emotions, to feel them, process them, and manage them, and deal with my family, people around me, everyone, it's right back front and center again. I definitely am not prepared for it. And for me, a lot of times it's sadness. When I get into a situation like that, what I've noticed about myself is I isolate. And I think it's that freeze mode that we talked about with the trauma. Remember that trauma thing?
Yes.
And I become almost like where I have to go to bed, and I like sleep, and I'm in this process of like my body accepting
Freeze mode. That's good.
this
Yes.
news again. And
Yes.
so I can't, that whole first day spilling over into the second day, I can't talk to people. I can't talk about it. I just have to isolate, hibernate, whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah. So your body goes to freeze mode,
Yeah.
and it takes some time to move back into
Yep.
parasympathetic
Yep.
so that you can process without deep depression stopping you from being able to do
Yes.
or freeze, whatever that freeze looks like.
Right.
Wow.
And I think the day after for me has been a better day. It's been a day of dealing with acceptance. For me is a big issue. Do I still need to process anger, sadness, and fear, those kinds of things? But usually I make it sound like it's a clean deal. Like, okay, I process that, I'm done.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, I might be okay the next day, but then 3 days later, I might be, oh my gosh, all these emotions are coming in, and now I have to deal with them. And for me, sadness is a biggie.
Can you explain? You said something to me earlier. We talked about this ahead of time just a little bit, and you said, and you can rephrase what I'm going to say here, but it's basically a recurrence is, even though I still think it's reoccurrence, but a recurrence is worse than the initial news. Can you explain the why and what's going on?
I think it's because when you initially get the cancer news, there's fear, yes, but it's a new territory. You haven't been there yet. So you don't know what major surgery will be like, or chemotherapy, immunotherapy treatment. You don't know what it's like. Then you go, then hopefully the journey is one, at least I'll speak for myself. I do it day by day, hopefully. And, my doctor in my last procedure said he's done 40 to 50 procedures on me. But with major surgery, I've been in the hospital for like a month.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had no idea that what that would be like when I was first diagnosed with cancer, right? So when I had a recurrence, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can do that again.
Yeah.
Like that, because I knew what it meant. I knew what the treatment would be, what the surgery would be, and it's this daunting like giant in front of you, and I think it's how do I process that giant in front of me?
Let's talk about the physical aspect of this. Makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you're talking about it, because sometimes we just want to make this just a spiritual thing, and there's we have many parts to us, and to ignore the bodily impacts is big. In fact, I'll even say that we have one of our staff members here who's been struggling with bladder cancer, and he had a recurrence, and he just got back to where he could urinate easily, and
Right.
it was like my body just got to the place where it was functioning, and now I have this new diagnosis. We're going to start all over again. So it was such a gut punch for him that he was basically describing physically, because he knew, it was just, there was something about, hey, I've got to where I can operate again. Things are moving, and it's, oh no, you're starting right back at ground zero.
Right.
Was a gut punch.
Right.
And so the physical side, I think it's good for you to appreciate that. I want to talk about a different side of this too, and that is, and so I don't have a recurrence in cancer. But I have had to deal with what I'm going to call what happens when you get the same test twice or three times. And so in the spiritual, because part of this is a journey of the tests of life, or the journey, the hardships of life that you're walking through. And so the question has come to me is, all right, God, I've gone down this road. I've been tested in this way. You know how I've responded to this. You know how I've grown in this. Why am I getting a repeat of this thing? Haven't we done this already? I don't know if that strikes you in any way, and what your thoughts are related to this.
I mean, I think that how I felt about this cancer journey, and I'll relate it to that, what you're talking about, is that it just kept going and going. Surgery after surgery, treatment, but there was like no end in sight. And I remember 2015, I had, again, open me up, revise everything inside. Those are tough surgeries, those big abdominal surgeries, a lot of stuff going on with them. And then I remember in 2017 when I had the recurrence and it was metastatic, and they're like, okay, there's nothing more we can do. Go home and call hospice. But before that happened, my doctor, my surgeon, God bless him, was like brainstorming, sitting next to me, and he's like, well, I can remove your entire urinary system, right? Like he was talking like that, and we can do X, Y. And I just did a timeout sign to him, and I'm just like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't do these major surgeries anymore. Physically, my body was like spent. I'm like, I'm struggling just to take a breath. I can't do it. I can't even think like that anymore. And yeah, there was this, at that point, of course, I didn't know if I was going to go to heaven or not, pass or not. But yeah, I think there was this.
So that you didn't mean between heaven and hell. You didn't know which way you were going.
No, I knew where I was going.
Sorry.
I just didn't know if I would pass from it. And sorry.
So it just sounded, I didn't know if I was going to heaven. It sounded like, I could understand, Peter.
No, I know where my destiny is. But I do think there is that uncertainty and doubt as to, hey, why is this happening again and again? It's like Groundhog Day and again and again. And I think for me personally, I'll speak for myself only. God had me in a really stripping down process.
So there was another
Really
layer to
stripping
be
down.
worked
Yeah.
through. So you found
Yeah.
with each one of these, there was a new something
Oh my
that God was
gosh.
doing in your life, and and all of them difficult, but there was a new layer there.
Yeah. I mean, you know, none of us would ever compare ourselves with Jesus, but I was reading Philippians yesterday, and the verse starts out with Jesus not regarding his equal status with God a thing to be held on to,
Mm-hmm.
but it said, but emptied himself and took on the form of a slave. I think just the constant repeated recurrences just emptied me of any of myself. I couldn't, even my self will.
Yeah,
I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. And
that's
it's like a
interesting. Yeah,
desperation.
I'll touch on that for a second because that's
Yeah.
in the Beatitudes we both have locked on to this. Blessed are the poor in spirit,
Mm.
and but there's other components that are there that are at the start of the Beatitudes also, and there's blessed are the meek, which means being stripped of your power. So the
Mm.
poor in spirit is like you have no wealth. Some translations in sort of blessed are the poor,
Mm-hmm.
but there's the poor in spirit. But there's like blessed are those who have no power,
Mm.
and you kind of work out that there's actually several characteristics that have to be stripped of us as we're moving towards something that's greater than ourselves. And so, and there's ways of thinking about this that I'm going to guess that in my own journey I recognize that no, it's not just a matter of becoming physically poor, but there's also something about becoming poor in other areas that are why the retests are there, or why there are new levels of this that are happening in my own life. And so when you start looking at the Beatitudes, you're going to see that there are progressions of things that need to be worked through to get to the point where there's fruit that show up, that you
Mm-hmm.
become a peacemaker,
Mm-hmm.
and you become somebody who exhibits the character of God. And so that's the spiritual, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
way of, but is that in reality what's taking place? Do you feel like that's what's taking place with the retests? Is that why?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been any kind of self will or control that I felt I had over it. Like
Yeah.
Peter can do this, it was stripped away completely.
Yeah.
And what came out was, I can't do this, as a matter of fact. Jesus could do it in me and through me, but I can't. Peter can't. He's done.
Yeah.
And so if that's a good definition of spiritual poverty, and that's a launch pad for the other attributes, which
That's like
I
definition of
like that.
meekness, like that you
Yeah,
are, you move to one who's no longer pursuing power. You recognize how powerless that you are.
yeah,
And we talk about powerlessness a lot in recovery, that it's a place that you have to get to,
yeah,
that you become powerless over your condition in your life. And there's a surrender point that's necessary.
yeah,
But there seems to be layers of that. That's what I found in my own journey, is that
yeah,
there's layers of things that are being held on to.
yeah.
But I want to take a slightly different look too, and that is this appears to be a case where, let's say that you have a recurrence.
Mm-hmm.
More likely than not, that means that you believed that you had moved through this initial cancer journey and maybe
Yep,
had hope in healing. You know that
yep,
this was that
yep,
cancer was in the rearview mirror and you weren't going to see it again.
yep.
You mentioned it earlier when we were talking, and it's what do you do when God says no? When there is, it's accepting
Yeah.
these limits. It's accepting that reality is different than
Mm-hmm.
what I perceived it to be.
Yep.
Which I
I,
think is grieving. What did that look
yeah,
like?
so
What
I
is that?
think
Yeah,
acceptance equals peace is a huge concept that we talk about,
yeah,
and it is. It's huge. But in order to get to the acceptance, you have to work through the grieving process for you. For me, It's usually not so much anger for me. It's usually fear and sadness
Mm.
working through this. Not even bargaining kind of thing. Denial, not really. It's fear and sadness.
So you talked about that first 2 days
Yeah.
is freeze.
Yep.
Now where do you go? What do you do
Because
in that?
the thoughts that come in are, am I prepared to die? I mean, are my kids ready? Am I ready? And
Yeah.
are all the practical? I run through all these checklists.
Yep.
Is that ready?
Yep.
And I can't do it. I'm overwhelmed, so I go into a freeze state
Yeah.
because it's too big of news.
Yeah.
And then the next day or the day after, I'm out of the freeze state, and that's when I can get up and deal with and manage my emotions on a better level. And for me, I mean, I have an advantage, I think, because I'm going into my 19th year in just a few months, and I've had 6 recurrences. I've been told twice to go home and call hospice, and I know how all that feels. I've been through it. I have the experience of, and I've had the experience of God partnering with me through it. So they've all been faith building experiences.
Yeah, but not faith building that he's going to heal you.
No.
Describe what you mean by faith building.
Yeah, that I can surrender this to God and he will see me through it. I mean, even recently I struggled with my health and I had a PET scan and I thought it was not going to be a good PET scan. And I thought, well, if I go into an end of life process, Jesus, you're going to be with that. You're going to walk alongside me through the whole hospice journey as you have done with all the other journeys. I'm confident of that. So that's what I mean by that. And that's a nice place to be. I mean, I've got 2, people in our cancer support group doing end of life processes right now.
Yeah.
And, I'm watching God come alongside and partner with them and their families. And they're experiencing lots of peace in that.
So there's something that you're building, a foundation that you're building upon is what I think I just hear you say is that, hey, you have learned and grown in trust in your peace journey because you're getting peace from God himself. And so the next layer of this is to allow whatever transformation, whatever acceptance needs to be there, needs to be processed, embraced.
Yeah.
And then as you're embracing that, you can have peace again.
Yeah, and I'm a kind of an unlikely guy from many evangelical viewpoints to have been healed miraculously, because it's not like I demanded it, declared it, or anything.
Yes.
And yet Sloan was in, all of the best medical advice said, send him home and call hospice. There's no way he's going to get out of this.
Yeah.
I experienced a dramatic healing where my doctor says, this is God. So I tell people about that because you never know what God's going to do. I mean, God is amazing and mysterious at times. And I had a dire diagnosis, and yet God performed this miracle. But I've also been with so many people that have done the end of life process. But so I think the issue is, am I ready to accept what God's doing in this situation?
I heard a good Devo, and I want to see if this relates and get your thoughts on this. And it was along the lines of God starts with the baby steps, that the idea of this dot and tittle out there are the smallest letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and that as you hit this, it's take the next baby step that you can because it looks overwhelming, and it doesn't mean that you're fighting every little detail. It's that there's at least a baby step to be taken out there. And it may be towards peace, it may be towards healing, but it may also just be towards God and understanding that letting go and trusting.
Yeah.
And that it's just taking the next baby step. And then that's how you do this journey, is
Yeah.
putting together a bunch of baby steps.
And the serenity prayer is like living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. How do we enjoy one moment at a time? And I know
Yeah.
that when I'm surrendering and depending on Jesus, even the drive to the medical appointment is good. It's not a bad drive. It's okay. I mean, I'm not talking about traffic. I'm just
Yeah.
talking about my
No, right.
mindset, my where I'm at.
Yeah, that you're exhibiting to me what I think we talked about in the Joseph's journey, is accepting that
Yeah.
there was a pit, there was Potiphar's house, which represented slavery, and there was prison, and yet in the end, it was because God had a better than plan, and that you were accepting now this better than plan. At some point in
Mm-hmm.
time, accepting that is the most important part of this for finding peace,
Yeah.
I think. But
Yeah, and I think the goal is the non-anxious presence is the goal. And people recognize that all the time. And where I go for my treatments and surgeries, all the time they say that to me. And they describe it as peace, but it's really um, being in a place where I know God's in charge of
yeah,
me, of my life.
yeah,
And right now, this is what he has for me. This is what I'm facing. Am I willing to accept what he wants to do in me and through me? Can God do amazing things while I'm sitting there getting my IV put in, putting my gown on? And the answer is yes, because people can. It's a testimony to myself,
yeah,
but to others that wow, God can take an anxious situation and turn it around. Doesn't mean that I'm always. I mean, all I have to do is get my blood pressure checked, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, it's up a little bit. I know why. I'm in a cancer center.
yeah. Well, I wanted to say something about that because
Yeah.
this is, you mentioned the non-anxious presence, and we both have talked about this a lot. And this, comes out of a bit of that term comes out of Failure of Nerve, is a book that referred to a lot, Edwin Freeman's work. And the idea of that was one of the greatest gifts that we can give is a non-anxious presence. But a non-anxious presence is not a presence that you can kill all your anxiety. What it
Mm-hmm.
means is that, and so when I listened to what you shared today,
Mm-hmm.
is like when recurrence comes,
Mm-hmm.
you have to work the process. You
Yeah.
have to feel it. It's going to knock you on your butt to start out with in some manner because it's heavy news. It's worse news than the first diagnosis because it means that there's something there that is still alive and happening in some way
Mm-hmm.
that's these sounds devastating. And then you begin the processing of acceptance, surrender, um, working the process, the treatments, all of that. And as you grieve and you surrender that, it's not that you didn't feel anxiety, because anxiety is a natural thing in our body, is that you processed it.
Right.
And so we're not, I don't think either one of us are sitting here saying, hey, your job is to get rid of anxiety. Your job is to embrace reality and then find peace in that reality as you see that God is in the midst of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you embrace Him and what He's doing in the midst of that reality, and you've surrendered it in the grieving process, your anxiousness can turn to peace.
Right.
And so it's not that you didn't feel it, you
Yeah.
did. And you said it again. It's like, hey, I have my blood pressure. I'm in this
I'm
place.
a
It
highly
creates
anxious
a
guy.
feeling.
Yeah.
And then you allow that to have its place. And then you don't ignore it. You don't stuff
Right.
it.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest key, is not stuffing these feelings. It's let's process. And you have no idea what tomorrow brings. You don't have a guarantee of another healing. On the third test, or the fourth test or the fifth test, the answer might be, no, this is it. This is the last time.
Right. Right.
And you may go home to be, you may pass.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a hard truth, but your peace at that point hasn't been grounded on that I'm always going to survive. Your peace is, no, there's someone greater than me holding me
Yeah.
in His hands.
That's it right there, Sean. I think that's it. That we talk about higher power because of recovery, but it is the fact that I believe and know. It's not just an intellectual belief, but know in my heart and spirit that Jesus is in charge and carrying me and will never leave me nor forsake me no matter what's going on. And just because I don't understand what's happening doesn't mean he has a loving purpose in it.
I think the mistake we can make on this, like, 'cause that's really good, is to act like this is a quick fix, though, and that's the one thing where just trust Jesus,
Yeah.
and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
You can have peace, but the truth is that it's a long process. That
Yeah.
you've got years of struggle, of recurrence, of surgeries, of pain, and processing, to where that's, I think, in some ways why we see in our lives multiple tests is because we can't do it in one test. We don't
Right.
get there to that place of working through all these surrender points in our
Right.
lives, or understanding our anxiety or our scars, and how to be, deeply
We did
in
that.
love.
We did that white knuckling episode that time. Remember that?
I do. Yes.
And I was like, yeah, I white knuckled it all the way up until I got the metastases. So I had already had recurrence,
Yes.
but it was,
You white knuckled it. Yes.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good.
and then
remember,
after
yeah.
that, I couldn't white knuckle it anymore.
Yeah. So it does explain why there were more tests.
Yeah.
She had to let go of that. And
Yeah.
wow.
And I think that this is my journey. Like sometimes I'm going through my journey and I look at someone and I'm thinking, oh no, I hope they don't think they have to go through a cancer journey for 18 years. But this is my journey. This is what the journey God has me on. And
Yeah.
some people may learn the same thing.
Through a different test, though.
Yeah.
Well, that's the reason why I mentioned it's like I feel like I'm going through another test that I thought I passed. In a sense, not passed in the sense that I'd
Yeah.
learned the lessons on, and
Yeah.
so why am I seeing that again? And obviously, there's something else there that is worth
Yeah.
exploring for my own personal life. And so as
Yeah.
I think about that, I was thinking about, it's very similar to recurrence.
Yeah.
Even though I would say reoccurrence, but it's very similar to recurrence.
Yeah. I was thinking about Abraham, and there's a great test. I want you to leave your home and travel to a place that you've never been. I am God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he leaves his family, and you think, okay, that's the test. Then he has several tests in his life, including ending up in Egypt, right?
Yes.
And what? And then he has to wait 20. He's promised a son. And the thing with Hagar, Ishmael's another thing but he's promised a son and he has to wait 25 years. That's a test. The son comes, and then God says, I want you to sacrifice your son,
Yeah.
your only son, who I'm going to bring my promise through. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Like, I can't do that.
Yeah. But it's interesting because the test's purpose was all about drawing Abraham's heart close to God's, and God had no desire to harm Abraham or to harm Isaac.
Bingo, you got it.
But
Draw our hearts closer. That's it.
And so,
Yeah.
I think he learned that in that test, in those tests, and really connected with that.
Yeah. And same thing with, at least in my experience in my cancer support group, same thing. Some people were even thankful because it drew their heart close to God.
You've seen that over and over again. So that's such a testament to the cancer journey and its importance in spiritual journeys. And real peace is not being disease-free. Real peace is being in the hands of the one who created us.
Oh, man, that's a great statement. Yeah.
So I think that's where we're going to wrap up today.
Yeah,
Unless you have something else
great.
you want to add. We definitely appreciate everybody for listening. And
thank you for your prayers, those of you who pray.
And if you're going through recurrence, I just hope that you can also see God's hand in peace and be able to surrender, but not feel, when I listened to your story, Peter, on recurrence, and you didn't say, hey, it was all good the second time because I already knew it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, to hear that, hey, this is going to be a process, but God's in this. Is still really cool to hear that from your
I
story.
mean, right now I've got kidney, not failure, but renal insufficiency and all that. And so there's still aspects of the journey that rear its head, and it's constant.
Yeah. So this journey's ongoing, and
Yeah.
that's an encouragement to all of us
Mhm.
that to see your non-anxious presence in that space and being able to love others. And I think the depth of love that just keeps growing. And that's what I think God's heart is for all of us on this journey. So have a blessed day. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.